One of the things that we'd like to do with this production in this series is to begin to examine when did the New Testament come into existence and when did the discussion about New Testament and Old Testament start taking place. Those arguments come into existence after Paul and after the life of Jesus. So when we're studying the New Testament and we're seeing Paul write to these churches and these congregations, or we're studying the New Testament, we're seeing Jesus teach, we really need to have a sense of what Jesus and Paul actually had to work with their written documents. And that is, as we've discussed in other places, the Hebrew Scriptures, or the translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, which are called the Septuagint or the Greek Scriptures. But what I would like to do in this segment is to really set down that Paul, even though he's a Pharisee, even though he was trained at the feet of Gamaliel, even though he is a writer that is really difficult to completely understand, he still is a disciple of Jesus who has to teach exactly what Jesus is teaching. Otherwise, he's not an apostle of Jesus. This is an eternal truth that must stand true in order for Paul to be consistent with Jesus. We saw in our last segment that Jesus teaches us to love God and to love others. So let's go into a concept of love God and the Apostle Paul. And we know, this is Romans 8, verse 28, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose. I have heard lots of lessons come from this verse. And the central teaching that I have always heard is that good things work for Christians because they're doing things according to God's purpose. But there is a central point in that verse which is very important. Paul says, at least according to the King James, work together for good to them that love God. So what did Jesus teach? Love God and love others. What is this verse teaching? While it says everything works together for good, it is saying love God, for them that love God. So Paul, through all of his writings and how compact and yet how intricate his writings are, he's teaching in this verse to love God, them that love God. So look at 1 Corinthians 8 and verse 3. 1 Corinthians 8 verse 3. But if any man love God, the same is known of him. So Jesus says, love God and love others. And Paul is saying here in this verse, if any man loves God, God knows the man. And that is a powerful thing. So we're looking at all of these powerful things that are being put out by Jesus and his teachings and Paul and his teachings. And we're not trying to argue about theology at this point. We're trying to see that their core teaching is the same. Love God and love others. And to love others is going to be in our next segment.